Today, Sex and Religion explores the lesser-known story of a very famous gesture and then looks at the darker side of taking pictures as we focus our lens on an illuminating topic, art. I'm Laurie Brown. Much of our understanding of religion comes from artistic interpretation. Synagogues, mosques, and churches are adorned with images that exalt and deepen our religious devotion. The depiction of sexuality in religious art is actually nothing new. In fact, historically, the only time an artist could portray a nude figure was in a religious context. That doesn't mean that these depictions came without controversy, though, then or now. Today, we're starting with Leonard Nimoy. The original Spock's first love was not, in fact, acting. It was photography. And an experience he had as a child would one day lead him to expose the beauty he saw in sex and religion. Leonard Nimoy's first sexual encounter didn't happen where you might imagine. There was no girl in the next-door neighbor's window, and no magazine catalogs were involved. There wasn't even a glimpse of a matronly aunt's slip at a family dinner. In fact, Leonard Nimoy's first sexual encounter happened in one of the most unlikely of places. It happened at synagogue. The catch is, he didn't even know it at the time. He didn't even know it was a girl he was seeing.
The easiest way to tell the story is that when I was about, I think maybe 8 or 9 years old, high holiday services with my family, there comes a point in the service where the Kohanim, who are the members of the priestly tribe of the Hebrew people, get up to bless the congregation. And this was an Orthodox synagogue where the male and female are separate. The men sit typically in those days downstairs, and there's a balcony for the women. When these gentlemen get up to bless the congregation, the prayer that they're saying is in Hebrew. And they were loud, ecstatic shouters. It was almost like a revival meeting, a gospel kind of atmosphere. And my father said to me, "Don't look." And in fact, everybody had their hands over their eyes or their prayer shawls over their heads. But I was, I'm 8 years old and there's something really strange going on, so I peeked. And I saw them doing that with their hands as they were blessing the congregation, as they were shouting this prayer. It was kind of chilling. I had no idea. It seemed magical. It seemed very theatrical, certainly. And I was intrigued, and I started to practice to learn to be able to do that. And I don't know, I didn't have any intention for using it anyway. I was intrigued with the gesture.
What he didn't realize was that it was at that moment, that day in synagogue, that Leonard Nimoy met the Shekinah, the female face of God, who in many ways would change his life forever.
To me, art is about illumination. It is about finding interest in an idea and researching that idea in order to illuminate what the idea offers. And to a great extent, art, when you present it to a public, is a way of helping people to understand something about themselves. I grew up in Boston, in the inner city. It was a tenement neighborhood, 3- and 4-story walk-up brick buildings. We were 3 generations in one apartment, my grandparents, my parents, my brother, and I. As far as religion was concerned, we were not regular temple goers except on high holidays, the occasional holiday and certainly the high holidays. We were very much aware that we were socially and culturally Jewish. This was the family camera. My first images were photographed with this camera and enlarged with this camera, and with about 20 cents worth of Kodak supplies. And I just became fascinated with the ability to create an image, something that you could hold, an object that you could hold in your hand, and there it is, something I shot this morning, and tonight I have the picture in my hand. I could hang it on my wall, I give it to my family or whatever. That was the beginning.
Most people think they know the rest, how he became an actor, became famous as Spock on Star Trek, and introduced the Vulcan hand greeting. However, many people don't know about Leonard's work as a photographer, or how that hand greeting became something more. Leonard Nimoy brought this gesture from one world to another.
Once I introduced it into Star Trek, there were a lot of questions about it. People would ask me, what is it? Where did it come from? What does it mean? And for a long time at Star Trek conventions or whatever, when I would talk about it, I would say in public, I don't know why you're not supposed to look. My first guess was that you're not supposed to look because you're being blessed. And typically, if you're being blessed, you bow your head to take the blessing so as not to seem proud, to assume a posture of humility. And then I had this conversation with the rabbi where I asked him specifically about it. Is there some reason that I don't know? And he came up with this story about the Shekhinah. He said, the legend is that during that prayer, during that benediction, the Shekhinah, the feminine deity, comes into the sanctuary to bless the congregation. Being a deity, she gives off this radiance, this powerful, powerful light, which could be injurious if you see it, if you look at it. And that's why you cover your eyes and don't look, to protect yourself. So I was struck with that, and being a photographer, I thought it's about light. Photography is often about light. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do an essay on the subject of the light and the presence of the Shekhinah, this feminine aspect of God. That's the shape of the letter Shin in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the first letter in a number of key words in the language. It's the first letter in the word Shaddai, which is a name for God. It's the first letter in the word Shalom, which is the word for peace. It's the first letter in the word Shekhinah.
But if you're not supposed to look at the Shekhinah, how do you photograph it?
I went back to my negatives because I had done quite a bit of work with female figure. And I went back to the negatives to see what I had that would lend itself to this kind of spiritual connotation. And I began to introduce into some of those images, I began to introduce the shape of the letter Shin, to superimpose it on some of these images to see what that dynamic created. What's happening is a crossover between sensuality and religion. That's a provocative intersection. And my concept was, I will go out with my camera looking for the Shekhinah. I will try to create scenarios where I will find her, or I will happen upon places where she might be. And I worked with a lot of different models over a period of 7 or 8 years to develop the body of work that became the book called Shekhinah. I was due to speak about the book at a Jewish Federation dinner in Seattle. And one day, the agency that had booked me called me and said, we have a request, there are some nude photographs. And they ask you to eliminate any nudes out of your slides, which was not a problem because of the 30 or 40 slides that I was showing, there were images that I was showing, there were only 3 or 4 that were nudes. There was a lot of sensuality in a lot of the images, but only 3 or 4 nudes. A day or two later, she called me, the agent, and said, they've now asked you not to show the images at all on the screen. So I said, well, that's a serious problem, because that's my reason for going, is to talk about the book, and the book is a book of photographs. And it would be silly to stand there and talk about photographs that I can't show. And we agreed to disagree, and I said, fine, then I won't come, and let it go at that.
But not everyone was willing to move on.
The newspaper, Seattle Times, I think it was, got hold of the story and ran a sizable piece about the fact that I had sort of been disinvited. The Associated Press picked up the story off the Seattle Times story and ran it nationwide. And suddenly the book was a hot seller as a result. So being banned in Seattle was useful, as it turned out, for the publisher. And then Saturday Night Live did a sketch about the fact that I had been censored in Seattle by the Federation. It just got to be kind of this amazing controversy over this subject.
Now, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that Leonard's book became such a big story. The question is, was it just controversy for controversy's sake? John Rossove is Leonard's rabbi. He's the one who first told Leonard about the Shekhinah.
If people are afraid of the showing of a nipple, and that this somehow shocks the American Jewish and perhaps some elements of the Israeli community as well, I say it is not ugly. Yes, it is erotic, and it can be beautiful. And Leonard took it as part of the form of the female figure that is the personification of the Shekhinah, feminine indwelling place of God. And from that perspective, I think the way he presented it is really quite beautiful and quite meaningful and inspiring.
To me, the book is a very strong feminist statement, and among other things. And I think to some degree, in the Orthodox community, that makes people uncomfortable with the idea that God is a woman.
I have to say, this is not a modern concept. If you read the Bahir and the Kabbalistic literature from the medieval period, these rabbis were right there. They were very erotically oriented. And if you go into a very Hasidic shul, I mean, there is ecstatic prayer going on that verges on the erotic. Hasidim, when they're davening, it's as though they're making love. So this is the controversy, I think, is a reflection of a puritanical Western American world that needs to get over itself.
Communities, religious communities, political communities, do tend to react somewhat fearfully. People look at a painting or a sculpture, and very often it helps them get in touch with something that they don't often get in touch with. That's what art is supposed to do for you. I still consider myself a good Jew, and I can see where some people would be sensitized to a degree and would find it difficult to look at these images. And I've done this presentation many times around the United States and Canada. And when I talk about it and I'm about to show the images, I say, look, if you think you're going to be offended or bothered by these images, I'll tell you what, do what my father told me, don't look. You know, I'm going to show them now, shut your eyes.
On the face of it, Leonard Nimoy and Diana Thorneycroft are two artists that have little in common. Yet, as we're about to see, both of them used profound childhood experiences to create art that explores the intersection of sex and religion. Diana's art, however, is less about finding beauty in religion and more about exposing its ugliness. When you first visit Diana Thorneycroft's studio, you might think you're visiting a toy shop. It's only when you look closer at the toys do you see there's something more going on here.
I do actually a bunch of different kinds of artwork, drawing and sculpture and installation and things like that, but I think I'm most known for my stage tableau photographs. A stage tableau is a photograph that involves a backdrop. I'm not a natural sculptor, so I buy a lot of things, I alter a lot of things, I pay people to build things. After I assemble everything together, I then photograph it. My photographic process is a little bit different than most people. I work in total darkness, I lock the shutter of my camera open, and then I illuminate the set.
Diana might be best known for her series, Group of 7 Awkward Moments. Using revered paintings by Tom Thompson, Lauren Harris, and their contemporaries, she created and reinterpreted history by turning the storied landscape of mythical Canadian art inside out and upside down. The grounded Avro Arrow is a puddle jumper in the remote north. A friendly game of shinny goes awry when Bobby Orr falls through the ice. There is humor, albeit a bit warped.
I never worry about what people think. I can't control that. If I did, I'd never make any work. I mean, the purpose of making artwork is to get people to think. And oftentimes, the artist becomes a target, but usually when someone responds, it tells me more about them. When people respond, and even if they respond in anger, I think that's a good thing.
Not all of Diana's art is so humorous, though. Her exploration of Canadian history also took her to some shameful places. She began a new series, one that exposes a much darker subject, sexual abuse within the Catholic Church.
The piece I'm working on now is based on a particular priest named Charlie Sylvester. His nickname was Sylvester the Molester.
Charlie Sylvester spent most of his career as a priest, not far from London, Ontario.
That's better. Okay, I'm going to take a shot now.
In 2005, he pleaded guilty to 47 counts of indecent assault. Complaints about him went back as far as 1962.
He would groom them, and he would get them to love him and trust him. And then he would harm them. He was accused of actually raping and touched them and fondled them. In my photograph, it's the potential. He's not actually doing that. I'm not interested in showing an actual rape. That's just too much. If I was really showing blatant, bad, wrong, horrible evil, people would walk away. And I'm not interested in doing that kind of work anyway.
Diana Thorneycroft's art is not without its critics. Not many people want to look at pictures of priests abusing children, even if they are toy priests. Choosing to look at the ugly side of sex and religion is not something anyone would enter into lightly. Diana's grandfather, a lay minister, didn't give her that choice.
I remember him telling me about wet dreams. I was in grade 5, and ejaculation, and what happens, why men have these wet dreams, and where babies are born, how, what part of the body that they come from. And another incident, and I've been thinking about this a lot, why he was in my bedroom I have no idea. But he also would touch my breasts at age, well, I was 10, and he would say, one day these will grow. And yeah.
We can't always control what happens to us in life. We can, however, control what we do with those experiences. Diana has channeled her experience into her art. The question is, why has she chosen to take on the Catholic priesthood and not just her grandfather?
It just seemed at the time that was when I was being instructed, and in my mind they're linked. And it just seems that if I accept God, I also accept what Granddad did. The feelings that I have when I'm setting up the photographs are mixed. There are feelings of revenge. There are feelings of, I have a voice for all the kids that have been harmed, and I'm really glad that I'm speaking, because a lot of little kids do tell adults that they're being harmed and they're not believed. So that feels good, but also feels slightly icky sometimes, and it's exhausting.
Diana's work forces us to ask the question, are there some subjects that are sacred? Are there some subjects we just shouldn't touch? As Leonard Nimoy says, if we're offended by what we see, can't we just close our eyes? Diana suggests that not all art is meant to make us feel good. Some of it is meant to make us think, even if it's about the darker side of sex and religion.
The literature of Judaism, the Torah, and the stories of Jewish, the history of the Hebrews, is loaded with sexuality, loaded with it. Well, what about David and Bathsheba? Saw this lady bathing naked and decided he wanted her. And that was that, you know. That's just the first example that comes to mind. It's loaded with sensuality and sexuality. I don't think of it in terms of sin. I think of it in terms of it as being part of the human condition.